Number 8. The Caspian Sea Monster. The Korabl Maket, known informally as the Caspian Sea Monster, was developed by the Central Hydrofoil Design Bureau in the Soviet Union during the 1960s. It was an experimental ground effect vehicle that was primarily utilized by the Soviet Navy up until 1980, when the over 300-foot-long vessel finally crashed into the Caspian Sea. The surprise discovery of the KM by the US and the later attempts at figuring out its purpose became distinctive secret missions during the extreme period of geopolitical tension now known as the Cold War. And from 1966 to 1988, the Caspian Sea Monster was both the heaviest and largest aircraft in the world. The massive vehicle's first flight happened on October 16, 1966. It was performed by two men, Vladimir Loganov and Rostislav Alexeyev, the KM's chief designer. This was pretty unusual considering the fact that most aircraft designers from the Soviet Union never test drive their own projects. But apparently Alexeyev just couldn't resist the temptation. Further testing of the vehicle showed that it had a top cruising speed of 267 miles per hour, but it had a maximum operational speed of 311 miles per hour. There's been some sources that have claimed the Caspian Sea Monster could reach insane speeds of around 460 miles per hour, which is even more bizarre to think about since the vessel was roughly 1.2 million pounds. At first, the KM was seen as a promising vehicle that was specifically meant to be used by rescue workers and military officials, although its design caused far too many difficulties in the end. For 15 years, it was tested on the Caspian Sea, but in 1980, a pilot error caused it to crash, ultimately destroying it altogether. Luckily, there weren't any casualties. The KM was deemed far too heavy to be worthy of recovery, and so it's remained at its underwater crash site ever since. Number 7. USS Enterprise Aircraft Carrier. Once known as CVAN-65, the USS Enterprise is a decommissioned aircraft carrier that was formerly used by the United States Navy. Built in 1958, she was the 8th U.S. naval ship with the name. She was also the first ever nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the entire world. Measuring a whopping 1,123 feet, she's the longest naval vessel ever built to this day, and the only ship of her class. The Enterprise's 94,781-ton displacement makes her class the third heaviest carrier class, coming in right after the Gerald R. Ford class and the Nimitz class. And when she was still in use, she typically had a crew of about 5,000 service members. In June 1962, Enterprise joined the U.S. Navy's Second Fleet on her first operational mission, completing training off the east coast of the United States. There, she participated in Exercise Lantflex 262, which was a covert nuclear strike exercise. And in August that same year, she met with the Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean Sea before going back home to Norfolk, Virginia on October 11, 1962. Throughout her many years of service, Enterprise was involved with multiple military operations and exercises, like Operation Sea Orbit, the around-the-world cruise of the U.S. Navy's Task Force 1 that happened back in 1964. She also participated in Operation Frequent Wind in April 1975, which was the last phase in the evacuation of at-risk Vietnamese and American civilians from Saigon before the city was overtaken by the People's Army of Vietnam. During her inactivation, Enterprise was the third oldest commissioned ship in the U.S. Navy, after the wooden-hulled USS Pueblo and USS Constitution. On December 1, 2012, she was officially inactivated for good, and on February 3, 2017, after over 55 years of service, she was finally decommissioned. On that same day, she was stricken from the Naval Vessel Register. Number 6. Typhoon Class Submarines. Under the Soviet designation Project 941 Akula, the Typhoon class is composed of nuclear-powered submarines designed and built by the Soviet Union for its navy. Typhoons are able to accommodate living facilities for about 160 crew members while submerged for months at a time. And with an incredible displacement of 48,000 tons, these submarines are the largest ever created. The Typhoon class is said to be named after General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev's common use of the word typhoon in his 1974 speech, where he described a brand new kind of nuclear ballistic missile submarine. This new vessel was launched in response to the newly built U.S. Navy's Ohio-class submarine. The 574-foot-long Typhoon class was equipped with 6 powerful torpedo tubes that were designed to handle Type 53 torpedoes, or RPK-2 missiles. In normal conditions, these submarines could stay submerged for an incredible 120 days, potentially even longer if it was necessary. Their main weapon system consisted of 20 R-39 ballistic missiles, each armed with a maximum of 10 MIRV nuclear warheads. And what's even more terrifying is that Typhoons could deploy their long-range missiles while still moored at docks. But in March 2012, the Russian Navy's Typhoon modernization program was canceled thanks to insufficient funding, and by September of that year, only one Typhoon-class submarine remained in service. It wasn't decommissioned until February 2023. Number 5. Panzerkampfwagen Maus. In March 1942, Friedrich Krupp AG, one of the world's leading arm manufacturers and steelmakers, was given a directive for the development of a brand new heavy tank. But who gave the order? Well, it was none other than Adolf Hitler himself. The tank was designated in the 100-ton class and was supposed to replace the previous concept of a 72-ton tank, which began in 1938, headed by Rheinmetall, a German-based automotive and arms manufacturer. They aimed to produce an operational trial vehicle in the shortest amount of time possible, and to be ready for its reveal by spring 1943. Just 2 weeks later, on March 21st, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche was handed a separate independent contract for the exact same thing, a 100-ton tank. In the end, the Nazis went with Porsche's design, marking the birth of the Panzerkampfwagen Maus. The 188-ton vessel was impractical to say the least. The timing of its introduction was quite strange as well. Shortly before, Germany had lost the oil fields in Africa and had started to run short on fuel for its vehicles, so announcing a gas-guzzling monster that would definitely be time-consuming and extremely expensive probably wasn't the best move. But regardless of how bad the timing was, Hitler gave the go-ahead on the Maus for mass production in 1943. The tank's main armament consisted of a 12.8-centimeter PaK-44 anti-tank gun, which could be loaded with 68 rounds. But the Maus was still missing a close combat armament, an issue that was later addressed and taken care of in the form of a short-range defensive ordnance that was able to be mounted on the turret roof. The heavy tank was intended to take practically no damage while punching holes through enemy fortifications, but Hitler's vision never made it to fruition. Only 2 Maus prototypes were ever created, and apparently, they were never even equipped with their proper weapons. One of these tanks is still intact though to this day, and is on display near Moscow at the Patriot Park Museum. Do you think it's okay for a country's military to spend millions of dollars on projects that don't even work out in the end? Or do you think it's a huge waste of money that should be given back to taxpayers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 4. The Char 2C tank. Developed during the First World War, the Char 2C was a French heavy tank that was later given the designation of a super heavy tank. In physical dimensions and total volume, it was the largest operational tank ever made. Only 10 Char 2Cs were built, and they obtained quite the reputation from the public as being invincible. But French commanders at the time were well aware that this reputation was undeserved. The Char 2C's main armament consisted of a 105mm gun that had to be shortened to reduce its recoil so it could actually fit into a turret. At 69 tons, the tanks were very difficult to move, and steering problems made the heavy-tracked vehicles even harder to control. Even though it had an operational range of 93 miles, which is impressive, it had a max speed of only 9.3 miles per hour, leaving it susceptible to anti-tank guns. By June 1940, 4 of the tanks had already broken down and were destroyed. The 6 remaining Char 2Cs, on the other hand, received an order to be sent to Neufchâteau in northeastern France by train. On the way there, they ran into some tracks that were blocked by a fuel train on fire, making it impossible for the tanks to get unloaded. So in order to stop them from being captured by the enemy, the command was given to destroy them entirely. Number 3. Mil V-12. Created by Mil Design Bureau in the 1960s, the 92-foot-long Mil V-12 was, and still is, the largest helicopter ever built. It was a huge heavy-lift aircraft undertaken by the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Under the codename Homer, which it was given by NATO, V-12 had its test flight in June 1967, but its first successful flight didn't happen until the next year. And despite how promising the project seemed, the V-12 was simply never meant to be, since production of the vehicle was cancelled after only 2 prototypes were completed. the Soviet Union tried making a helicopter capable of lifting 55,000 pounds of cargo, and in the end, they successfully exceeded that goal. In July 1968, the V-12's first prototype lifted an incredible 97,455 pounds of cargo to a height of 7,398 feet, ultimately setting a new world record. But despite the helicopter's achievements, the Soviet Air Force refused the V-12 for several reasons. Ultimately, operating costs were way too high to be justified. The procurement of materials to build the craft were hard to come by, and with the Soviet mission starting to change, the helicopter lost its defined role. As a result, the V-12 program was shut down entirely in 1974. Number 2. Lockheed C5M Super Galaxy. With a wingspan of over 222 feet and a length of 143 feet, the C5M Super Galaxy is currently the biggest aircraft owned by the U.S. Air Force. Produced in the late 1960s by Lockheed Martin, its objective is to transport personnel and cargo for the Department of Defense. The C5M is equipped with 28 total wheels, 5 sets of landing gear, a state-of-the-art maintenance diagnostic system, and 4 General Electric F-138 engines. It's capable of carrying oversized cargo overseas and can easily take off and land on short runways. Both the aft and nose doors of the craft are able to be opened, allowing ground crews to load and offload cargo from each end simultaneously, ultimately reducing cargo transfer times. The C5M also has drive-on ramps at each side, which enables 2 rows of vehicles to be carried. And amazingly, the Super Galaxy can fly 2,150 nautical miles, carrying 281,001 pounds, offload, and then without even refueling, it can make it to a second base another 500 nautical miles away from its first destination. Number 1. WASP Class LHD. The WASP class of LHD amphibious assault ships are used by the U.S. Navy. LHD is short for Landing Helicopter Dock, which is just what it sounds like. The WASP class is capable of carrying basically the full strength of a U.S. Marine Corps Marine Expeditionary Unit, and can get them to hostile territory via helicopters or landing craft. These vessels also provide air support through F-35B Lightning II stealth strike fighters or AV-8B Harrier II attack aircraft. Built in the city of Pascagoula, Mississippi by Ingalls Shipbuilding, the lead ship of this class, the USS WASP, was first commissioned on July 29, 1989, and is still in active service today. With a displacement of 41,150 tons and a length of 843 feet, the ship was designed to allow for the operation of landing craft air cushion hovercraft and AV-8B Harrier II aircraft, marking the first time a vessel was specifically designed to operate them. On its 266 by 50-foot deck, the LHD can carry 40 total amphibious assault vehicles, 12 landing craft mechanized, 3 landing craft air cushion, and another 21 AAVs on the vehicle deck. The vessel's flight deck consists of 9 helicopter landing spots and can operate tilt rotors and helicopters as big as the Sikorsky CH-53E Super Stallion, which is 99 feet long and weighs over 33,000 pounds. Now that's a big ship. If you could test drive any of these military vehicles for a day, which one would you choose? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!